I'm litigating a wrongful death case. My client is completely destroyed because he lost his daughter prematurely due to the carelessness of somebody else. It is the worst pain he could ever imagine suffering. And he is so depressed, he really doesn't even want to get out of bed. His depression is so great that he has no desire or inclination to do anything for himself, let alone deal with a wrongful death lawsuit. Me, as the attorney, I have a duty to present my client's wrongful death case in a way that's going to get my client full and fair settlement value for his claim. So in order to do that, I have to present evidence to the insurance company, and then ultimately, if the case doesn't settle, to a jury to prove the full extent of my client's suffering. So how am I going to do that? What evidence can I present? One of the things that I have done in the past is I have hired what we call a grief expert to testify about what my client has gone through, what my client has endured because of the premature death of my client's loved one. However, what I've run into, I tried a case one time, I brought the grief counselor or the grief expert in. The grief expert interviewed my client a couple times and testified on the stand about the pain and suffering that my client had to endure. And it was effective, and the jury ended up rendering a multi-million-dollar verdict in the case. However, what happened was the defense filed an appeal because they objected to the grief expert's testimony, saying that an expert's testimony should only be allowed by the court if the expert's testimony is adds something that a jury would not understand under normal circumstances. And so their argument is that everybody understands that it's painful to lose a loved one prematurely. And so this is something that is within the normal human understanding. It makes no sense to have an expert come and explain it to the jury. And so that was a basis for their appeal. And so they filed this appeal. They filed the appeal after we won the big verdict, and then we filed a response brief. That appeal was never actually heard because my client, the survivor who had lost his daughter, ended up dying before the final judgment came out. So the appeal was never heard. So we don't know what the appellate court would have ruled. But the lesson that we learned from it is it's very important not to just use a grief expert to testify about your client's pain and suffering. It's much smarter for a wrongful death, the survivor of a wrongful death, to actually go through counseling with a grief counselor and to have the grief counselor testify about the treatment that the client received as the client is going through the grieving process. That is something that is admissible in court. So the grief expert, it's questionable as to whether or not it's admissible, but the grief counselor almost certainly is admissible in court. So every single person, every single survivor of a wrongful death needs to go. It's extremely important to go to a grief counselor, not only to deal with the loss in a healthy way, but also to build the evidence so your wrongful death lawyer can convey to the jury the full extent of the suffering that you've endured. You see, these cases live or die by the evidence, and the evidence comes from the testimony of the witnesses involved. And one of the greatest witnesses that you could have for your wrongful death case is the grief counselor that has helped you through the grieving process. And that's an objective witness that is a professional that really can really explain to the jury a lot more of the in-depth psychological idiosyncrasies involved in losing a loved one, and particularly if you've lost a child, which is one of the worst, it is probably the worst pain a human being can suffer. the counselor could explain why there's such a depth of pain and suffering involved in a situation like that. So the point to this topic, to this vlog is, I want to make sure that everybody who's involved, if you're involved in a wrongful death case, an element of your damages is your mental and emotional pain and suffering. It's very, very important that you do the grief counseling. That is critically important. And so when your lawyer says you need to do grief counseling, that's not just a suggestion. That is a critical element of getting you full and fair value for your case. So please take that very seriously. It's incredibly important. All right. My name is Jimmy Fasig. I am a wrongful death attorney. If you have any questions about this or any other question related to wrongful death, please give me a call. I'm happy to talk to you. My number is 850-777-7777. Again, my name is Jimmy Fasig. I'm the senior partner of Fasig Brooks Law Offices. I am a wrongful death attorney. 850-777-7777. Thank you.